You know that person, right? You try to call them, and boom, straight to voicemail. Every time. You shoot them a text, and you hear nothing back for hours, maybe even days. It's this modern-day puzzle, the person whose phone seems to be permanently on silent. So let's get into it.
The big question, of course, is why? I mean, are they just flat out ignoring you? Are they lazy? Well, it turns out the answer is way more complicated, and honestly, a lot more fascinating than you'd think. It goes really deep into our own psychology.
Look, it's so easy for our minds to jump to these simple, kind of negative conclusions. We think, oh, they're so arrogant, or they must be ignoring me on purpose. But the truth is, the reality is usually rooted in something way deeper. We're talking about things like psychology and the basic human instinct for self-preservation. It's almost never that simple. So today, we're going to break down 4 very different psychological profiles that explain this whole thing. All right, let's start with our first type, who I like to call the energy protector. For these folks, notifications aren't just annoying, they are physically, genuinely jarring. A lot of the time, this all comes down to a biological trait, a highly sensitive nervous system. Now, if this sounds like you, it means your brain doesn't really filter out all the stuff coming at it, sounds, lights, even digital pings, the same way other people's brains do. Yours just kind of absorbs it all, like a sponge. And that means you can get overstimulated really, really easily.
And we're not just talking about a minor inconvenience here. The reaction is incredibly physical. For an energy protector, a sudden loud ringtone can literally trigger a fight-or-flight response. I'm talking a real spike in your heart rate, a jolt of adrenaline. It feels like an actual threat to your system.
So here's the thing you gotta understand. When they silence their phone, it's not about avoiding life. It's an act of self-care. It's about them choosing calm over chaos, just so they can keep their mental and emotional balance in check. Okay, let's move on to our second type, which builds on this idea, the overloaded mind. Now this one is less about biology and way more about the insane pace of our modern world. Just take a look at this list. Does any of this feel a little familiar? Yeah. You've got work, you've got family, personal projects, a social life. Their brain is just constantly juggling a dozen different things, all of them high priority. It's running at full speed from the second they wake up. And what's the result? A phone that is just buried under what feels like hundreds of unread notifications. For the overloaded mind, every new alert isn't a fun little connection. Nope, it's just another demand on their attention, a resource that's already completely drained. This constant state of burnout can actually lead to something psychologists call time blindness. See, when your brain is that swamped, it kind of loses its ability to judge how much time is passing or even figure out what's the most important thing to do next. Everything feels urgent, which means nothing gets done right. So in the end, for them, hitting Do Not Disturb becomes a straight-up survival tactic. It is the only way they can find a single moment of mental quiet to actually focus on one thing, without getting pulled in a million different directions. It's basically their shield against the digital storm. Now our third type, this one is probably the most poignant. We'll call them the numb survivor. For these folks, the silence isn't about managing energy or to-do lists. It's about managing past pain. Their behavior is often rooted in a psychological concept called learned helplessness. Basically, what happens is, after someone goes through a ton of stress or drama or disappointment over and over again, their brain starts to believe it can't change the situation, so it just stops expecting anything good to happen. This quote from our source material it captures it perfectly. That quiet, calm exterior you see today, it wasn't free. It was bought and paid for with experiences that taught them that a phone call or a text usually brings more pain than it does joy. So for the numb survivor, a ringing phone isn't exciting at all. It's become a trigger. It's a symbol that they now associate with getting bad news or getting pulled into drama or having to deal with toxic people. Do Not Disturb is their quiet armor. It's how they protect a peace that was incredibly hard to find. And that brings us to our final, and apparently the rarest type, the emotionally independent. Now, their reason for staying silent is completely different from everyone else we've talked about. It's not driven by anxiety or being overwhelmed. It's all about autonomy. A good way to understand this is through something called self-determination theory. The basic idea is that real happiness doesn't come from external stuff, like money or praise. It comes from fulfilling these deep internal needs, like feeling in control of your own life. That's autonomy. And this, right here, is the game changer.
While a lot of us get that little dopamine rush from a like or an instant reply, this group's self-worth just isn't tied to digital attention. Their sense of value comes from inside. So they decide when they're available. The phone doesn't get to decide for them.
So as we pull this all together, you start to see this really powerful theme emerge. For the first three types we talked about, the energy protector, the overloaded mind, and the numb survivor, silencing their phone is, at its core, a defensive move. It's a shield they have to use to survive a world that just feels like too much.
But for the emotionally independent, their action isn't defensive, it's offensive. They're not silencing their phone just to survive the world. They're silencing the world so they can better hear themselves.
So here's a quick recap of what we just covered. We've got 4 different types, each with a totally different core driver. The energy protector is dealing with sensory overload. The overloaded mind is facing cognitive burnout. The numb survivor is using it as a protective armor. And the emotionally independent is driven by inner autonomy. Each one tells a really unique story.
And that kind of brings us to the final thought I want to leave you with. After hearing about these 4 types, it's probably worth asking yourself this simple question. When it comes to that little device in your pocket, who's really in charge? Do you control your phone, or does it control you?